Hello, hi Chitral, how are you?
Hi, Indra.
Hi, how are you? All good? Found it okay to join
All
in?
good, all set. Yes. Good
All
evening.
right. Good evening, good evening. So how's it been? All good with the lockdown and everything?
Well, it's been, 48 days and counting, so I never stayed at home like this.
I think none of us have. Um, just to get on with the whole thing, um, all of us, I think it's been now seventh week into the lockdown. Every one of us is feeling the boredom and the feeling of being inside, stuck at home. How have you been dealing with it? How have you got on with life, been keeping yourself preoccupied? How's it been going?
Well, I just returned from India after now looking into two new parks on Tiger Safari and the leopards in Javai on the 8th of March. So I just made back home in time without having to go into quarantine. Uh, And I saw this coming because we saw the tension even in Delhi when we were boarding. So I came back and quickly managed to get some supplies and almost kind of predict this. And then all of a sudden, by the 11th, we had a situation, and by the 20th, we went into lockdown. So now been
Yeah.
almost too long, but we are patiently braving this until things are relaxed.
Okay. All right. So, have you been, I don't know, while you're at home, have you been taking any photographs? Have you been keeping yourself occupied by maybe bird watching or something like that?
Well, I live in Mahadivela, which is slightly 12 kilometers off the city. So my house overlooks the paddy field. So I
Okay.
do get a little bit of bird life around, some water birds. I've seen the parrots and some other birds flying over the rising moon sometimes from my roof. So a little bit of
Wow.
things to photograph, but I was just trying to keep myself occupied by editing most of the pictures we've been accumulating over the years, because often as photographers we don't get the time to sit down and wade through all the pictures. So that has been
Yeah.
keeping me mostly busy.
Not bad. That's true. So, just while we're on the whole photography topic, um, how did you get into this whole wildlife photography? Was it like a passion you had when you were a child, or is it something that you caught on along the way? Or how did you get about it?
Indra, my father was a seriously keen photographer in his young days, and
Okay.
two of his very best friends happened to be two of Sri Lanka's best known cinematographers.
Oh,
So these three families were traveling when we were, young children in school. So each family had a kid each, and we would get into two cars and travel into national parks and archaeological sites for our school holidays. And naturally, with my father and his two best friends, late B.B. Nihal Singh and late Sumit Singh, who were legendary photographers, naturally inspired me to hold a camera when I was as young as 11. And I never turned back.
oh wow. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, you were recognized by the Duke of Edinburgh as well at the age of
Oh,
19.
that was almost a lifetime back. I was only 18 years old, and the wildlife department had its 100th year anniversary, I think, and it had a massive photographic festival. And back then, I think, wow, I can't even imagine when it was. I believe it was 1980, I believe.
Wow.
And the big man, the Prince Philip, was here to watch an elephant drive close by to Wilpattu done by the DWC. And he happened to be the chief guest in that photographic award ceremony. And I was lucky enough to receive an award from him.
Wow, at the age of 18. Wow. Um, I've also read about this, about how you're very much involved in the Project Leopard and the Elephant Project in Midden area. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, what happened was I became very seriously keen on photography since I was about 15, 16 years of age. And at
Okay.
17, 18, I was already spending a lot of time in the parks, and I naturally fell in love with any wild cat. So obviously, the leopard was the biggest star. But later in life, I started following the other small cats in the country, like the jungle,
Fishing cats.
the rusty spotted, and the fishing cats. But
Okay.
as we grew older, we got matured in and started doing work and got into our careers. We felt that it was good to try and understand these animals we love to so much and try to do what we can to, kind of help their conservation and also mitigate certain frictions these animals may come into along with the villagers who live very close to their habitat. Because it's good for us to go and see them occasionally, but people in the villages, they have to live with these animals. And when you live very close to a leopard's home range, it's not as fun as for us to take a camera and go and visit them occasionally.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so that's how that aspect came about. One of my very good friends, late Dr. Ravi Samarasinghe, started a project to try and mitigate the human leopard friction. I really want to emphasize on the word friction. There is no
Yeah,
conflict.
yeah,
And sadly, Ravi left us in a very untimely vehicle accident. And then I managed to convince my CEO at Cinnamon Hotels, and we adopted that program, which we renamed as Project Leopard.
yeah.
So
Okay, all right.
that's a simple solution where we start giving 10 by 12 steel mesh uh, pens to cattle farmers to keep the young cattle safe at night, uh, almost making them leopard proof. Because what otherwise what happens is the leopards are very smart cats. They get into
Yeah,
the indigenously made pens by the cattle farmers and they almost play with the young calves and kill one calf, but the claw marks they make on the others die in a couple of days through infection.
okay,
So
okay.
one bad incident, the cattle farmer loses two, three calves, then three or four mothers run dry of milk, and then there's a reason for revenge. And we've seen the cattle carcasses poisoned and thrown back in the jungle, and in 5 days you have three dead calves and a poisoned leopard, so everybody loses.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's when we launched Project Leopard, and it has been quite. I'm very happy to share with you that it has been effective in mitigating that issue.
All right, okay, that's interesting. So then the elephant one was something that moved on from the leopard project?
Yes, over the years, I've always felt that because Cinnamon, I work for Cinnamon Hotels, and
Yeah,
uh, we are very closely situated to Yala. So Project Leopard was based and managed from the Yala team, and
okay.
then I wanted to try and launch something to understand a little more of the gathering, which is now seen by Animal Planet as the sixth greatest animal event in the world.
Okay.
So we have two more hotels in Habarana, which is just 20 minutes drive from the Kaudulamin area national park, where the gathering occurs. So we managed to get the support and the participation of Sri Lanka's best known elephant scientist, Dr. Prithviraj Fernando, and
All
we
right.
launched Project Cinnamon Elephant 4 years back. So it had two phases. The first 2 years was to photograph every possible male elephant in the theater and open files about their features. Then we had to import three satellite GPS collars and get the collars on the matriarchs through the vets of the wildlife department because they are the only vets who are authorized to put the collars.
Okay.
So we now have two colors on. We are following two matriarchs. One of the matriarchs have given birth 6 months
Ah,
ago.
okay, nice.
So 3 times a day, every 8 hours, there is a satellite blip that comes, and when we follow two matriarchs, that effectively means we're almost seeing the movement of almost 30 plus elephants over the month. So in another 6 months, we'll see a very vivid picture of how the elephants move during the rain, during the drought, and in between how close they get to the human settlement.
All right, okay. So it's helped a lot with the conflict with human and animal.
Well,
So,
that one you can fairly say it's a conflict. Sri Lanka's human elephant clash is very much a conflict. We
yeah.
lose, very unfortunately, as much as 70 to 80 human beings and a staggering amount of elephants, sometimes over 300 elephants annually.
Wow.
So it's a full blown conflict.
Yeah, yeah. Before we move on with the next few topics, I have a couple of questions that some people have asked. Do you mind if I ask you?
Yes, certainly. Go ahead.
Okay. Oshini wants to know if she can volunteer and help out with Project Leopard or the Elephant Project.
Wonderful thought, Roshini. Very kind of you to say that. We can definitely find space for volunteers to help us with Project Cinnamon Elephant. It is still going on. Every week, I'm getting a satellite map of the GPS scholars. I will be sharing that on my Facebook page, which I received from Dr. Preeti Virat's office.
Okay.
And because of the curfew, our movements are a little hampered, but hopefully in another 20, 30 days time, we'll hit the field again and get in touch with me through Aindra, and we will certainly want you on board as a hand to help us. Thank you.
All right. Brilliant. There's one more question. Ridma wants to know, as travelers, if there's anything they can contribute towards wildlife conservation.
Well, I like to, I see myself as a traveler. I travel very often in Sri Lanka, and 5 years ago, I launched Cinnamon Holidays, through which I initially traveled to India in search of the tigers, then to Kenya, to Brazil, to Indonesia, to Madagascar. So we're all travelers, and as travelers, we can always contribute to conservation.
Yeah.
Firstly, we must travel responsibly. We must try always to try and understand a little bit of the animal's behavior, which we go in search of, so that we know how much to get close, how not to get close. Leave the animal alone at the right time, because you will understand its moods and its behavior. And also it helps us, because it'll help us see the animal without wasting much time, because especially if you travel overseas, you have limited number of days to see what you go to see there. And understanding the natural life, the natural behavior of the animal, and how sensitive that animal is to its environment, helps us to see and enjoy that animal without disturbing it.
Okay. I hope you got your answer, Ridma. One more question for the room. Actually, it's a comment. Isuru wants to say that you have accomplished an amazing amount of accolades and in terms of conservation. So that's Isuru's comment. Budish has a comment, a message. He wants, sorry, a question. He wants to know what made you get into wildlife conservation.
Well, I think, Udisha, it was like a natural extension, because as much as, I mean, when you do photography as much as I have done since I was 11, now it has been 30, if I tell this, you're going to guess my age, but yes, it has been almost 41 years of continuous photography. What happens is you naturally fall in love with these animals so deeply, and you then want to try and chip in towards their well-being. And I was in a fortunate position, because I worked for the John Keel's Group and Cinnamon Hotels, and the management was very happy to accept some of our proposals in firstly chipping in with conservation funds, and then allowing me to raise more funds through our network. So that was just a natural call for me, but I would believe I was in a fortunate position at the right place to be able to raise these funds and help the scientists do the studies.
Okay. I hope, Budisha, I hope you got your answer there. Let's just move on to the next and the main topic tonight. So while this whole pandemic and this lockdown is going on, what most of us have come to see is that the earth is healing, that the fact that people are in hiding and people are not out there polluting and being in the way. There's so much of things happening. For example, now, just very recently, I read an article about the fact that the largest hole in the ozone layer had started to heal. And also you hear about animals who are coming into populated areas because they're less congested now. What are your thoughts from the wildlife point of view of, let's say, pre-COVID, the present time, and post-COVID, as in how it was before the virus, how it is now, and how you think it will turn out to be after this whole issue is constrained?
Well, pre-COVID, we had a lot of travel in the world. Where COVID started, as we know for now, being China alone has about 110, 120 million travelers outside China, and we are happy to receive them. Uh, so the issue is that when you travel too much into sensitive areas and habitats, you do put a lot of stress into these areas. And the worst thing I want to see is overcrowding in national parks. And uh, Sri Lanka has seen enough of it. I mean, if you
Yeah,
take
that's true.
the best national park in Sri Lanka being Yala, it has become a victim of its own popularity.
Yeah,
It's overcrowded. You can see as much as 60, 70 jeeps around one leopard sighting,
that's true.
and it kills the experience. So that was what it was, but it naturally created employment opportunities, revenues, and good income for villagers, which is all good. During COVID, as you said, well, nature, you can't rise above that. We can send a man to the moon. We can build these massive ships and aircrafts, but the power of nature and the natural world reigns supreme over all of us. And we must never, as a mankind, forget that every time we are either by design or by compulsion take a break, the wave of the natural world is ready to flow back into its original setting. So, as you see, we now have lots of birds in certain parts of India where they've never been seen in such numbers. We have sambar and deer walking on the streets.
Yeah,
Uh, so, the world is healing. It's almost like that nature has told us to step back while she does a self healing to the wounds caused by human greed. It's certainly not human need, but when we take too much, it becomes a stressful situation for even Mother Earth. Your third part of the question was about post COVID.
yeah,
I actually worry about that because uh, I watched this film, Troy, and in that film, Achilles says, we men are rich at things, we never know how much is enough.
yeah,
So whenever there is a vaccine and there is relative safety to travel, humans will always want to claim back what we lost in our national freedom. But I think in Sri Lanka, where we can control some aspects, we must now work with the government authorities and ensure that when Sri Lanka recovers in its very much needed tourism sector, we have certain sustainable controls in place, especially in parks that needed it so much, and keep those practices going so that the realignment of tourism is going to take time. It's going to take anything between 6 to 12 months, even more. So the gradual rise of tourism will give us an amazing opportunity to reset this process and ensure that we don't have overcrowding in national parks. And by doing that, you achieve two aspects. One is that the animals are free to do their usual thing, and the visitors who go to the park have a great experience.
okay, all right. Just another topic that I want to just bring out. What do you think now? With you could always say also say that the over tourism is a problem when it comes to national parks, but do you really think that the tourists not being in the parks is like doing just good for animals? Because if I'm not mistaken, like there are people running riot inside the parks. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that's a very good question because I am a very strong believer that good tourism is good for conservation.
Okay.
In today's day and age, if you leave national parks because they are declared as parks without tourism, what will happen is that there will be some politician who might want to cultivate in the national parks or distribute the land to the homeless. So that's one aspect. Number two is that if you don't have enough good visitors in the park, there will be a rise in poaching because there will be some elements of society who might think, oh, this is a great place to, make a quick buck. So
Yeah.
this is why we say that good tourism is a great way to ensure the sustainability of national parks and protected areas, whilst it becomes a natural deterrent to poachers being there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the continuous movement of tourist vehicles deters the poachers from coming out in the open. So
Okay.
it is a must that we must maintain good tourism, good numbers, and we must be able to walk the line, walk the balance, and ensure that we just don't cross that element of completely overcrowding the national parks. Not only national parks, in that aspect, even in Sigiriya, I strongly believe that there is a carrying capacity which Sri Lanka tourism and all of us in the industry must seriously give them.
Okay. All right. So my next thing is basically as a um, from a from your standpoint as a wildlife photographer, massive avid enthusiast. How could we as travelers be mindful? How can we be responsible and contribute to sustainable tourism? In your words, from a wildlife standpoint, when it comes to
I
wildlife
think
tourism and conservation.
there are a couple of things. I think if you travel responsibly to places, work with local people, local drivers, local guides, then you also contribute to their economies. And those people live through the conservation areas, and their life is sustained by working in parks. So we must ensure that our good tourism, our good intentions of being there, watch tourism helps the local communities to make ends meet, because
Okay.
that way they also improve their quality of life, and they put their children through school or better schools, and they make life better for themselves. This is number one to me. Number two is that if you are traveling in any protected zone, I would like to request all our listeners and our friends who have joined in, say a silent prayer when you enter the parks, because you're now entering a place of absolute serenity, place where humans' control is far less and nature rules supreme. Don't get completely addicted to seeing one particular species. I'm a leopard lover, but as long as you see something in the wild, be patient and wait for that moment where you see the desired object of a leopard, an elephant, or a particular bird. Because every time you go to the park, you don't see what you much favor, that you will see so many other animals in between. And if you keep a very switched on mind to appreciate anything in the wild until you see your favorite subject, you come out happier and you contribute with good vibes and good thoughts for the conservation of everything that is wild.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. We have a couple of more questions, if you don't mind answering. Um,
Yes, of course.
so, Isuru wants to know if you had a free hand, what would you do next? What would your next project be? Or what would your initiation be?
Well, I would love to launch something like what Kruger National Park has launched, of doing Kruger live during the lockdowns. We've
Okay.
discussed this with Sri Lanka Tourism already. Hopefully, we should get on board and give a live stream of what's happening in some of our parks, maybe the gathering, because it's easy to track and see, it's very predictable. But going beyond into when we achieve some normalcy, I believe we would like to be in a position to work with the government authorities and the decision makers in putting forward recommendations on how we can bring some method to the madness of overcrowding. We don't have to look very far, Indra. India has done this brilliantly in their national parks.
Okay.
Simple solutions. I mean, this is not the time to go into nuts and bolts, but extremely simple solutions have given them brilliant results, and we can always adapt them and give these solutions a Sri Lankan flavor. So I would love to be in a position to sit with decision makers in the government in a very objective manner, share the thoughts, let the ideas clash, and come up with a model where we will rebuild Sri Lanka's wildlife tourism in a much more sustainable manner.
Okay. Um, Atif wants to know what your favorite national park is and why.
Uh, that's a tough one. I almost like several. But I would believe I've seen many cats around the world, but I still feel that the best feeling is to photograph a leopard at Yala. So, given the choice, I'll always head back.
Okay. One more question. Sadushi wants to know what are the top three things in your view on how we can be responsible tourists on safari? But I think you already answered that though. But
Yeah. So, a quick checklist on top three things. Firstly, once you are in the wild, you need to change your behavior. It's not a
okay,
trip. It's not a fun, fanfare trip. It's not a place to go overboard on selfies. If you have a camera, if you use your phone, use the phone with the lens face to the animal and forget you being in the pitch. It's number one, because I think people go a little crazy with selfies and wanting to be in the picture with the animal. Forget that. Number two is if you're taking any food, make sure that you use enjoy the food and bring back every bit of the wrapper that food is packed in without throwing anything in the parks, because national parks are not a place to dump anything.
yeah,
Number three is just leave your footprints and carry back your photographs only. Don't even break a leaf, because these places are very precious and we need to keep it like.
yeah. Thank you. Just before we wrap things up, Chitra, I have one more question for you. Um, well, we are all in lockdown, we are all stuck at home, but I think everyone is waiting to be able to leave their homes and like go to places. Um, so as soon as the gates open and this whole pandemic eases out, and we are able to move a little more freely, where do you think you will go first? Where would you? Which national park would you go to?
Yeah. Well, as I said before, I mean, I like the Mara very much. Kenya is a very, very special place, and every time you go there and you get on the plane and the wheels lift off, you're already missing Kenya. But to me, I think when the lockdown ends, I'm really looking forward to heading back to Yala National Park in the deep south. Not really to see the leopards. I would probably see the leopards because there is less tourism now. But really to go there, probably to drive up to this amazing Manic River, which is a very, very sacred river that flows through the dry zone. Dip my ankles in the Manic waters, cool waters of Manic River, from where Block 1 and Block 2 is separated, and just,
Yeah,
and indulge myself in the birds chirping noises and nature. That would be my dream.
that is a dream, though. That's a nice place to be at. Thank you so much, Chitral, for joining me on this conversation. I think we'll be wrapping it up for tonight. That was a brilliant chat we had. I hope everyone at home also got a lot out of this chat as I did. Very knowledgeable personality we had. Thank you so much, Chitral.
Thank
Just
you, Andrew. Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it very much.
Okay. So just for everyone else, we'll be having this session every week. Next week, we will be having a chat with Mr. Priya Pinjers with about waves and whales. Um, if you want to get more information on Chitral, we have uploaded a little snippet on our website. The link is in our bio. And also within the next hour, this video will be up for anyone who did miss it. Um, please do join us next week for the same session on Thursday at 7.